everyone, thanks for joining. So today the sequence that we're going to be doing is for back bending, which is mainly actually just opening up the front of the body. And just to give a little background before we get started, to give you an understanding of what we're going to go through. So back bends don't really require back flexibility. It's actually opening up the entire front of your body. So people who can do back bends, they're very open in the front of their chest and their upper back, and they have a lot of flexibility in their ab muscles and just their quads all the way down the front of their body. So people who have trouble doing back bends generally just have very tight muscles. So for example, if you sit at a desk all day, the entire front of your body is going to be tight. You know, you're hunched over, or you're looking at your phone all day, or a computer, then those muscles are going to shorten. And so when you go to open up the front of your body, it's not going to be as easy as it would be somebody else who's constantly moving or active all day. And just to give you a background of the muscles, so when we're bent over all day, our psoas gets really tight and it begins to shorten. Our quad muscles, they get really tight. They're connected all the way from our quads to our psoas muscle, up to our ab muscles. So our ab muscle is actually connected to the pubic bone all the way up to the sternum. So that's like a pretty big, long muscle, and if it gets tight, then doing back bends is going to be really, really difficult to do. So today we're going to open up the front of the body, and we'll do a back bend at the end, or we'll do a bridge, whatever you feel comfortable with doing. So to start off, we will begin lying down on our backs, and just bring the bottoms of your feet together. So we're at a butterfly, and then come all the way down to your back. And you can place a hand on your heart and another hand on your stomach, just to get connected with the breath. Anytime your practice begins to get a little bit too much, or you're overexerting yourself, it's good just to come back to your breath. So sometimes deepening it and really focusing on the inhale, pushing your stomach out, and on the exhale, just releasing everything out. And slowly begin to make movements and push yourself up to a seated position until you come to tabletop. So your hands are in front of you, knees behind you in line with your wrists. And just kind of stretch your wrists, and moving back and forth, side to side, just warming your wrists up. It's always good to warm your wrists up at the beginning of the practice, just because depending on how many chaturangas that you do, or sun salutations, you're going to be holding planks and that sort of stuff. So it's always good to warm up the wrists before you begin your practice. And on an inhale, slowly arch your back and bring your head up into cat. And on an exhale, roll your spine up into cow. And do a couple of these at your own pace, just connecting your breath with the movement, warming up the spine. And after a couple of rounds, just come back to a neutral spine and slowly begin to shift your hips back. And also move your knees back a little bit as well. Maybe move your hands forward just to give yourself some space. And you kind of want to have your butt up in the air, like you're trying to push your butt up in the air. So kind of just adjust accordingly. And this is called puppy pose. And you want to think about taking your head in between your arms and pushing to the ground and lengthening through your spine. So it's almost as if someone is pulling your hips backward, but someone is pulling your hands forward. So it's really stretching out your body. And the reason we're doing this pose is to open up our shoulders and stretch them out. This is very important when you're doing back bends. And come back to tabletop. Move your knees back in a little bit. And tuck your toes under and push your hips up and back. Coming into downward facing dog. And just take a couple of movements here. Really stretching out your calves. Kind of rolling around. Feeling very tight in your body and maybe just sitting there for a little bit longer to warm that muscle up for the practice today. And come to your tippy toes, bend your knees and try to get your chest to the tops of your thighs as much as you can. And then slowly begin to straighten out your legs, pushing your hips up towards the sky. And then slowly begin to lower your heels down to the ground as much as you can. And if you need to still keep a little bit of a bend, that's totally fine. Just work with how you're feeling today. Maybe you're feeling a little bit more relaxed and you need something a little slower and not as strenuous. And just take it easy. And slowly begin to roll your spine up to the sky and rolling up and coming into a plank. Pushing out through the palms of your hands, your fingertips. Instead of sagging your hips down to the ground, think about pulling them up into one straight line. So your spine is in one straight line all the way from your head to your tailbone. So pull your belly button into your spine. So kind of tuck your tailbone under to help you with that. And you want to think about taking your shoulder blades down your back. So kind of roll them down your back. And then shift your shoulders over your wrist just a little bit. And slowly lower down to the ground, keeping your elbows as close to your body as possible. Keeping the same shape and lower all the way down to the ground. And on an inhale, lift up to low cobra. And exhale, lower down. Inhale up, low cobra. And exhale, lower down. One more time, try not to use your hands to lift you up so much. You want the work to be done in more of your lower back. And you want to think about rolling your shoulders back and open. So inhaling up, low cobra. And exhale, lower down. Tuck your toes back under, keeping your triceps in close to your body. You don't want them to be splayed out like this. Keep them in close to your body. And push back up into plank. And exhale, downward facing dog. Continuing to stretch, still feeling where you're tight. Moving your heels around and your feet around. And your feet can be together. They can be just slightly apart. They can be hip width apart. Just find what feels comfortable to you, what feels right to you. Everybody's a little different. And look to your hands and come to your tippy toes and slowly walk your way up to the front of your mat. And release your head down and let your arms hang. And take a bend in your knees. And take your arms behind you and clasp them together. And maybe let your arms hang. Maybe swing back and forth a little bit. All this time, just remember to relax the back of your neck and your head. And release your hands. And just walk your feet, your out, feeling the stretch in the sides of your legs. And slowly begin to inhale, rolling all the way up to the top. And your arms all the way up to the sky for high mountain pose. Squeezing your quads, squeezing your core, tucking your tailbone slightly under, and engaging your arms. And take your right hand to grab your left wrist. And begin to push your left hip out to the left. And move your hands over to the right side of the room. And keeping the front of your body straight. So you want to be looking forward. You don't want to be closed or twisting. You want to think about keeping your arm all in one line. So you're almost like you're opening up and you're looking up to the left part of the sky. And inhale back up. This time, take your left wrist or left hand and grab your right wrist and push your right hip out to the right. And take your left hand to pull your right hand over to the left. And inhale back up. And exhale, forward fold. Inhale, halfway lift. Exhale, plant your hands down on the ground. Step your feet back, coming into plank. So remembering the shape you were in earlier. You have a couple options. You can come down to your knees and do this flow, or you can keep your knees up off the ground and plank. Shift your shoulders over, and you can come down all the way into low cobra. Or you can actually do your upward facing dog. So lowering down halfway and inhaling, coming to the tops of your feet and looking forward. And exhaling, tucking your feet back under, coming into downward facing dog. And kick your right leg up to the sky and open up your hips. So bend your knee and bring your right heel to your right butt. And feel this stretch, kind of move your hip around in the socket, roll your ankle around. And then square your hips back to the mat. And exhale, place your foot in between your hands. And take your left knee down to the mat. And you can tuck your toes under so that you're on the tops of your foot. And inhale your arms up and grab your hands and kind of take a little bit of a back bend. And you should feel the stretch all here in the front side of your body, down your quad. Maybe go a little bit deeper, sit a little bit deeper in your squat or your lunge. And then slowly come back up and push your hips back, keeping your hips square to the front of the mat. And we're going to come into a runner's lunge. So slowly bring your chest down to the ground or down to your shin. And breathe. And come back to your low lunge. And begin to bring your foot. So come onto the side of your right foot. So roll to the side of your right foot and open up this part of your hip and bring it to the side as much as you can. So maybe sitting a little bit deeper in the lunge and bringing your hands down. And you can stay here or you can come down to your forearms and let your head hang. So still getting a stretch here in the front of our hip, but also stretching out the outside and opening up the outside of our right hip. So it's really important that our hips are stretched out and mobile. So when we go and do our back bends, they're going to be nice and open and it's going to be easier to do back bends. And if you're on your forearms, come back up to your hands and roll your foot back down Frame your right foot with your hands. And pick your right foot back up, coming into a three-legged down dog. And open up your hip for one final stretch. And lower your right foot down. Take your left leg up to the sky. And open up your hip on this side. So stack your hips all in one line. Bending your knee, bringing your left foot to your left butt. Moving the hip around in the socket. Maybe rolling your ankle. And then exhale, bring your foot in between your hands. Drop your right knee to the mat. Uncurl your toes so the top of your foot is on the mat. And inhale your arms up to the sky. Grabbing your hands and maybe lunging a little bit deeper. And bringing yourself into a little bit of a back bend. So just be gentle, we're still warming up. And then slowly begin to push your hips back, keeping your hips in line with the front of the mat. Straightening your front leg, and slowly coming over the top of your left leg for runner's lunge. And slowly come back up to your lunge, and this time come to the side of your left foot and begin to open up your hip to the side, and maybe staying here and just pushing a little bit on your leg and feeling that stretch and feeling your hip open up right here. Or you can come down to your forearms to go a little bit deeper. And slowly come back up onto your hands. Frame your left foot with your right, with both of your hands. Tuck your right toe under and take your left foot back. Bring it into three-legged dog and open up your hips to stretch just a little bit more on the side. And slowly lower your left foot down. And look to your hands, come to your tippy toes, bend your knees, and take a couple of hops here. It doesn't have to be anything big. Maybe they just look like this, or maybe you want more of a bigger hop. Just kind of play around with this, have fun with it. And forward fold, maybe bending your knees, still warming up the backs of the hamstrings. And then on an inhale, come up to chair pose. So tailbone slightly tucked under, pulling your shins back. So you should be able to lift your toes up off the ground and see the tops of your toes. So instead of sitting down low like this, just bring your chest up. You want your chest to be open. So if you need to sit up a little bit more in your chair, you can go ahead and do that. And continuing to breathe. And begin to shift the weight into your left foot, lifting your right foot up off the ground, and slowly bringing your right foot back behind you, and coming into a crescent lunge. Your hips square to the front of the mat, your left knee over top your left ankle, gaze forward, and relax your shoulders so your shoulder blades are kind of coming down your back, just letting them fall down. And bring your hands to your heart center. And inhale your arms back up, and slowly begin to lift your right leg back, coming into chair pose. And then slowly shift the weight into your right foot, lifting your left foot up. And then at your own pace, bring your left foot back behind you into crescent lunge. Right knee over right ankle, gaze forward, relax the shoulders. Continuing to breathe. Exhale, hands to heart center. Inhale, hands back up. And exhale, hands down to frame your front foot. Step back into plank and flow through to your downward facing dog. So you can go through to upward facing dog, or you can go down to little cobra. And inhale up. And then tucking your toes under and pushing yourself back up to plank and to downward facing dog. And if at any time, if you need, you can always come down to your knees and do this flow as well. And sometimes it's good just to come to a modified version, and that way, instead of using all your strength, you can focus on the form, which is more important than trying to muscle your way through the poses. So just take a couple of deep breaths from here. And lift your hands, come to your tippy toes, and jump up to the top of the mat. And inhale up, flat back. Exhale, forward fold. Inhale, back up to chair pose. And exhale, forward fold. Inhale up, flat back. Exhale, place your hands on the ground. Step back into plank and flow through to downward facing dog. Kick your right leg up to the sky and exhale, place your foot in between your hands. Inhale up to crescent lunge and exhale, open up to warrior two. Arms in one line. The front heel in line with the back arch of your left foot. Right knee tracking over your right pinky toe. So you should be able to peek over and see your big toe. And opening up your hips. So it's almost as if you're pushing through your back foot and you're pushing through your right foot, so your hips are being pulled open. So again, we're just stretching out these hip muscles in the joints. And take your hand to your back, or you can take your left hand to your back thigh and reverse your warrior, bringing your right arm up to the sky. So inhaling your arm up to the sky and exhaling, maybe going back. And inhale, come back up to warrior two. And exhale, bring your right elbow to the inside of your right knee, left arm up to the sky for side angle. Inhale, back up to side angle. I don't know if I have enough room here, so I'm going to scooch back a little bit. And begin to slowly push off your front foot. And bring your right hand down to the ground. Left arm up to the sky. Opening up your hips and stacking them on top of each other. Coming into half moon pose. So your gaze, it's a little bit tricky. Your gaze can be at your hand on the ground, or you can bring your gaze to your top hand. And exhale your hand down to the ground. And slowly move your hands a little bit closer to your bottom foot. Maybe grabbing hold of your ankle, coming into a standing split. And your hips can be open here, or you can square your hips so that your toes are pointing the ground. And exhale, release everything down to the ground. And place your hands down on the ground, step back into plank, and flow through to downward facing dog. And take a couple of breaths here to recoup a little bit. Take your left leg up to the sky this time. And exhale, plant your foot in between your hands. Inhale up to crescent lunge. And exhale, open up to warrior two. So same thing on this side. You want your knee to be in line with your ankle. And slightly tracking your left knee over your left pinky. Your arms should be all in one line. And really pushing through your front foot and your back foot. And you're really opening up the fronts of your hips. And take your hand to your back leg or your lower back and reverse your warrior two, keeping your lower body in the same exact position as it is. All you're doing is lifting your arm up to the sky and maybe extending it back just a little bit. And you're opening up the side body right now. Continuing to breathe. And come back to warrior two. And exhale, take your right elbow to the inside, or your left elbow to the inside of your left knee. Right arm up to the sky for side angle. If you want a little bit more ab work, you can release your elbow off of your knee and just use your core to hold you up. And coming back into warrior two, maybe scooching back a little bit if you're too close to a wall, and pushing off of your left foot, bringing your left hand down to the ground, right arm up to the sky, opening up your hips so they're stacked on top of each other. So you should feel like there's a wall behind you and your entire back is lined up against the wall. And your gaze can be down at your fingertips, or you can shift your gaze to your hand that's pointing towards the sky. Using your core to help you with your balance. So just tighten your core, squeeze your abs when you start to feel like you're wobbling. And then exhale your right hand down to the ground, squaring your hips. And move your hands a little bit closer to your foot and coming into standing split. So the key thing you want to remember here is you want your chest to be on top of your left thigh, or as close to it as possible. And that's key to doing a standing split. And you can keep your hips open, or you can square your hips to the ground where your toes are pointing to the ground. And then release your foot down to the ground, coming into forward fold. You bending your knees, going to a squat. Just move your joints around and relax your head. And move your feet about hip width apart. And take your peace fingers and grab your big toe. And take a bend in your knee. Relax your head. And slowly begin to straighten your knees. And use your fingers to pull on your toes to maybe go a little bit deeper in this forward fold. And release your fingers from your toes. Walk your hands up and your feet back, coming into a plank. Shift your shoulders over and flow through to your downward facing dog. And come to your tippy toes and slowly begin to round out through your back and your shoulders and begin to roll forward, coming into a plank. Shift your shoulders over your wrists and keeping your triceps in close to your body, begin to lower down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All the way down to your mat. And take the right cheek and place it on the mat and release your arms behind you. And come back to your breath, steady it a little bit. And squeeze your legs together. Bringing your feet and your toes, your thighs together. And take your hands behind you to clasp, or maybe making a fist, and opening up the front of your chest. And on an inhale, lift up the legs and open up the front of your chest a little bit more, coming into locust pose. And exhale down to the mat, this time bringing your left cheek to the mat. And this time take your knees so that they're about the same width of your hips. And bend your knees. In option 1, you can just stay here and lift your chest up if you can't reach your feet or your legs. Option 2 is to reach around and grab the fronts of your feet. And then option 3 is coming into a full bow pose. So on an inhale, you want to lift up, pushing your feet into your hands, and this automatically lifts up the front of your chest. So really pushing your feet, your ankles, into the backs of your hands and continuing to breathe. And exhale, release down to your mat. And take your hands beside you and push yourself back into child's pose. And slowly come back up into tabletop and bring your knees about hip width apart. And if you need a little bit more cushion on your knees for this next pose that we go into, I recommend doubling up your mat or maybe putting a towel underneath your knees. So you're just sitting on your knees and your shins right now and kind of standing on them. And we're going to go into camel pose. So this pose opens up the entire front of your body. It shouldn't cause any lower back pain. If it does, then just let up on doing this. So inhale your arms up to the sky. Take your right hand back to your lower back. And inhale, really lengthen through your spine. So someone is pulling a string that's attached to the top of your head and pulling it up towards the sky. Tuck your tailbone slightly under and relax your glutes. So you don't want to be squeezing your butt in this pose. You want them to be maybe a little bit active, but mostly relaxed. And begin to pull your chest up and back. And come back to the top, and release your hands and come to your heels. And we're going to go to the other side this time. So lift your arms up to the sky, this time taking your left hand to your lower back so fingertips are facing the ground. And inhale, really lengthening through your spine, tucking your tailbone slightly under, and relaxing the glutes, and push the hips forward. So your hips are really guiding you back. So lengthening up and back, pushing the hips forward, up and back. And come back to center, release your arm. And we're going to go for this one more time for the full expression if you'd like. So take both of your hands to your lower back, fingertips facing the ground. Inhaling, lengthening through the spine, tucking the tailbone slightly under, and begin to push your hips forward. So still lengthening up through the spine and relaxing your shoulders back. So you're really opening up the front part of your body right now. And bringing your head back a little bit more. And maybe reaching around for your heels. And then releasing the back of your head. And you're pulling forward with your hips. Relax your glutes. You should be feeling as if you let go of your heels, that you're going to spring forward. So that's how much your hips should be pulling you forward. And exhale slowly. Release your hands and come back up and sit onto your heels. And if your mat is rolled up, just release it or remove any towel you had into your knees. And then bring your feet in front of you so you're coming to a seated position. And we're going to go into reverse plank, and this will help open up our shoulders before we go into our back bends. So bring your hands maybe about a foot behind you. Your fingertips are facing towards your toes. And you might already feel a stretch in your wrist here. And we're going to slowly lift our hips up to the sky. Instead of keeping our shoulders rolled down like this, sit up straight and roll your shoulder blades back and lower them down your back. And slowly lift your hips up to the sky, really pushing through your palms and your fingertips into the ground. And lift your heels or your hips up, 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 opening up through the front of your shoulders, broadening through your clavicle bone. Continuing to breathe. And exhale, release down to the mat. And scoot yourself forward a little bit and fully come to your back. And bring your feet about hip width apart and take your hands down by your sides and scoot your heels all the way up so that your fingertips are touching the backs of your heels. And I have really long arms, so my feet don't come as close to my butt as probably the normal person. So figure out your spacing and get adjusted. And we're going to go into bridge pose. So we're just prepping for a full wheel right now. So option 1, just lift your hips up to the sky and opening up the front of your chest. So if you notice, your shoulders could be rounded. You want to open them up. So keep your shoulders glued to the mat and lift your hips up, relaxing your glutes and really using your quads and your hamstrings to push you up. And letting your hips guide you up, higher and higher to the ceiling. And exhale, release. You have an option of staying there and going to that bridge pose. Option 2, you can kind of take your shoulder blades and shrug them down your back and take your hands to clasp behind your back on the floor. So you're kind of rolling your shoulders down and lifting your hips up to the sky. Again, relaxing your glutes. Your kneecaps are facing the front of the mat in one line. And make sure that you're leaving space in your neck. So don't squeeze your chin to the bottom of your chest. Just relax that your chin is pointing to the ceiling. And exhale, release. So you have your first two options, and the final pose that we're going to go into is full wheel. So you can go ahead and try this, or you can go and you can do the first two poses that we just did, the first two bridge poses. If you're going to go into full wheel, take your hands next to your head. And a few things you want to remember about going into wheel. You want your elbows, so the points of your elbows, you want them to be facing the wall behind you, so they should be pointing that way. So some people tend to bring their shoulders or their elbows out. You want to keep them straight in one line. Another thing, you want to tuck your tailbone under just slightly, so help protect your lower back. And also, same thing as when we were just in bridge pose, you don't really want to be squeezing your glutes. You want to be engaging your quads and your hamstrings to give you the strength to push you up. So on an inhale, push up through your hips, and using the strength of your arms, come onto the top of your head. Using your arms, pushing all the way up into wheel. Remembering to keep your elbows pointed to the wall behind you. And focusing on the front of your body. You want to be pushing back versus trying to bend through your back. So pushing up towards the sky and lengthening through the front part of your chest from your abs all the way up to your sternum. Pushing your chest back and continuing to breathe. And pushing back, really opening up through your back shoulders and the front of your body. Inhale one more time, and exhale. Slowly lower down to the ground. And bring your hands next to your sides. And straighten your legs and just give yourself a moment here. One thing you want to remember about wheel is after you do an intense pose like that, you don't want to do a counter pose where you're rolling up in a ball. It's just too much of a shock for your body to go from one extreme to the next. So the best thing you want to do, especially after doing something like wheel, is just to lay here for a couple of breaths to kind of bring your body back to a sense of neutrality. And then, after about a minute or so, or a couple of breaths, that's when you can begin to bend your knees and then come into a little ball and maybe roll around a little bit. Release your left leg to the ground, keeping it straight, and keep your right knee tucked into your chest and pull it forward. So pulling your right leg a little bit closer into your body, maybe trying to get your knee to the inside of your right armpit. And then slowly move your right leg over, opening up your right arm to a T, and taking your gaze over your right shoulder. And inhale, coming back to center. Release your right leg down to the ground and take your left knee in. This time pulling your left knee close to your body And maybe pulling your knee into your left armpit as close as you can. This is a good stretch for digestion at the end of a workout. So we're just squeezing the organs right now, cutting it off from blood flow. And when we release, we're letting a lot of new, clean, fresh, oxygenated blood come back into these organs. So this is really, really a great stretch to do. And then slowly open up your left arm to the side and take your left knee over to cross the right side. And take your gaze to your left arm. And inhale your knees back up. And this time grab both of your knees and try to wrap your arms around them, coming into a tight, tight ball and keeping your back flat against the ground. So keep your tailbone flat on the ground so you're not rolled up and you're rolling around. You want to think about keeping it back on the ground and then pulling your knees in closer. And exhale, release. Bringing the bottoms of your feet together, coming into your reclined butterfly. And ending our yoga session the same way that we started, with our hand on our heart and our hand on our belly. So we begin to slow our breath before coming into Savasana. And slowly begin to straighten your legs out in front of you. Bring your arms to the side and just start to get comfortable. We'll take about a minute or so in Savasana, or maybe you just have 30 seconds. Just make sure that you take this resting period to kind of wrap up your entire yoga session. Every time you do it, you need a little bit of time to come back to your breath and just relax after doing a tough workout. And just slowly begin to relax. Relax your shoulders into the ground. Your arms, just let everything melt into the ground. And relax any tension you're holding in your face, in between your eyebrows, or on your cheekbones, or your mouth. And slowly begin to bring movement into your body so you can move your fingers and your ankles, your toes, maybe bending your knees and your arms. Just go at a pace that feels good for you. And slowly come on to the right side of your body, curling up into the fetal position, and give yourself a couple more moments before closing your practice. And using the strength of your left arm, Really push yourself up to a seated position. Bring your hands to your heart center. And we'll take one last final breath together. So inhale your arms all the way up to the sky. And exhale all the way down. Thank you guys so much for practicing with me today. I hope this was really good, or felt really good stretching out the front of your body. It's always good to do some sort of back bending pose or something to stretch out the fronts of your quads or your psoas muscle every day, just because we're sitting for such long periods of time. And if you have any questions, just leave a comment below the video, and I'll answer any questions that you guys might have for me. So thanks for joining me.